Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to our cloud coaching session today. I'm Violetta. I have with me Inge, coming from the Oracle EMEA Cloud Advisory team. Inge is joined by some of his team members. So we have Paul here, we have Olaf. So they are here to help you in case you have any technical questions during the call. We have my colleague Tom also. So all of us are here to help you and to guide you during this session. Today you will find how to enable the single sign-on SSO between multiple cloud providers. Example today will show Azure AD and Oracle SaaS best practices and integration patterns. The session will start with some slides introducing the topic, and then Inge will do a demo, so you will see how these services can help you. I think that was pretty much all on my side. Inge, the floor is yours.
Well, yes, thank you very much. And it's cool that so many people would like to join us for today. Let's see. Yeah, here's my screen. So thank you much for joining in. So today we're going to talk a bit about a single sign-on SSO and why that is important. And that is one of the most frequently asked questions we actually get. So before that, well, I've been working for Oracle for at least 3 decades, working on the security products for the last 10, 15 years. Coming from a database security background, but moved into cloud about 10 years ago to start with, when Oracle has the first attempt on cloud. So I'm spending most of my time on cloud security health checks, which is really important, advising customer how to set up and configure OCI to really avoid the pitfalls and make sure the security posture is in a proper shape. And we also spend quite a lot of time actually on GDPR and compliance questions as well, which is very important these days. So that's a little bit about me. So yes, I'm going to turn off the camera so you don't get defocused. So this is today's topic. So let's start. So why is single sign-on so important? And I think that is a very good question. And what we've seen is that, for example, in 2021, there was a number of mega breaches, which we call them, where a number of username and password were stolen. So I got mail from both Microsoft and Ticketmaster saying that, yes, dear Mr. Inge OS, could you please reset the password with Ticketmaster? Because we believe that somebody might have stolen the password. What they did not tell, and that is the real problem, what they did not tell is, by the way, if you're reusing some deviations of that password somewhere else, make sure that you really change that password as well. Many people either has a very bad password hygiene, which is easily then stolen from these mega hacks, and people are reusing the passwords in many different places, so it's really easy to guess the password. And with more than generic, more type of AI type of tools, and it's easy also to calculate what is the most highly likelihood of a new password that you're going to generate in a different site. So the password hygiene is weak, and the number of passwords we have is high, and that's basically generate an entry point for many hackers to enter into the systems without working too hard. So that's why single sign-on is so important, to reduce the number of passwords people actually have and really increase the security posture and the password hygiene around it. So most of you who are Oracle customers has got this mail, where we really tell the customer, please, please, please turn on NFA, because the password hygiene is so weak, and we see many customers that have colleagues where the cloud admin is doing the job proper, but other users of the cloud, they are still using the same password that they used on Microsoft or Ticketmaster or SolarWinds or whatever. And Microsoft did exactly the same thing. So what we see is that turn on MFA is one of the important things. The question is, how many MFAs do you have? So from an SSO point of view, what is really important is let's start with user experience. If you have a business to consume a kind of application, then actually getting people to use the application is the most important thing. And for younger kids, convenience is king. It should be super simple to use the application for having a large uptake. If it's complex to log on, you need to remember a bunch of passwords and you have to type this and that in order to get in. You kind of ditch that site, who cares? So the user experience in order to gain trust and gain attraction to your site is important also for the user logon experience. But what is more important from a security point of view is, of course, you get a consolidated audit. You don't need to grab audit from a whole bunch of different applications and systems in order to see who actually logged on when. Did we have a brute force attack? Did the person that claimed that somebody stole his cat a victim for a brute force attack? A consolidated audit is one of the key things you're really getting out of having a single sign-on solution. The other thing, it's much easier to enforce authentication rules, password complexity, and enforce MFA. And also MFA is kind of pain in somewhere in the body because people need to grab the phone all the time. So you can say, okay, my MFA lives for 10, 15 hours, 10, 15 minutes. So you don't need to re-authenticate with MFA every time. That increases the user experience without scar-facing the security. And more important is the user governance. Quite often you have a distributed kind of systems with a number of user stores in each system and solution. And like, for example, Linux, you have some users. In the database, you have some of the users where the user store lives its own life, independent of the IAM solution you have. So if somebody is leaving your organization, how many places do you really need to remove that user to make sure he's not able to log on? And the difference between the cloud world and the non-cloud world is that now some of these services are actually on the public internet. So even if you don't have access to the office premises any longer, you still have access to the cloud. That is kind of scary. So user governance is extremely important in the cloud era. And make sure that if somebody leaves and should not have access any longer, they are removed, and you remove them from one central place, which is the single sign-on solution. So from a pure security solution point of view, it's important. And also from a user experience point of view, it's important. So before I start discussing a few things that we need to be clear on, because I've seen that in a number of different RFIs and RFPs and questions from customers, that some of these terms are intermixed. Normally people think of federation as provisioning. So they kind of mix that. So, but to be clear, in our discussion, when I'm talking about provisioning, I'm also talking about user synchronization. Provisioning is all about the process of making that a person exists in a trusted source, a trusted repository like a HCM solution or like Azure AD or like AD or some LDAP kind of service. The person's identity is born somewhere. Then that is propagated to a number of target systems, and that is the provisioning process. In most cases, in order to be able to log on with SSO, the user account needs to exist in these different user stores that is spread across your application landscape. And to do that, you normally deploy some kind of provision mechanism to do that. And luckily enough, we finally got a standard that starts to be quite widely used, which is the SCIM standard, which is a REST API-based standard for creating users, updating users, deleting users, and group relationship in different user stores. So when a user is actually created or synchronized, then you're able to log on. And the process of logging on, that you go to the site and you're redirected back to the service provider, or sorry, the identity provider that is actually doing the authentication. That is the process of federation. So for federation to happen, and federation is actually the single sign-on process itself, for that to happen, the most common pattern is that user needs to exist to be pre-provisioned. So the standards for the federation piece that is done each time you log on is OpenID Connect or SAML, which, by the way, we support both. And we see that SAML is very, very popular because it's so easy to set up and configure, but we see that OpenID Connect is slowly taking over. We do have something called just-in-time provisioning, which is a mix between provisioning and federation. And that means, and with just-in-time provisioning, it means that you do not need to create the user up front in the user store. That is done by the federation service, the identity provider, the service provider, the minute you log on for the first time. That is also a pattern we support. It's not a pattern that everybody in the security space like that much. They think it's a security risk. So not having a long debate about that, but supporting that argument that it is a risk to do just-in-time provisioning because it provides less control and governance. But it's a feature that in many business-to-consumer cases, for example, it could be a very, very good thing to do. Let's say you have a population that should be able to log on to a central governmental system. Then instead of creating all the users, you simply create them on the fly when they log on, if in the case they log on twice in a year. So then in those use cases, it makes sense. The final thing that is important is this aspect, and that's why really working, pushing for SSO is to enforce multi-factor authentication. That is something you know, you username and password, something you have, like a mobile phone, or something you are. Like, for example, you have a fingerprint, you have some biometrics, you are sitting in an office building with an IP address, a number of things that could be a part of different factor that is used to verify that the person that claims you is really you, not just username password. So these are the different aspects we're going to cover today: the provisioning, federation, and multi-factor authentication. The central piece or central tool we use within Oracle OCI is the tool called Oracle OCI Identity Domain. It's used to be named IDCS, which has now been replaced by Identity Domain. It's basically the same thing, but OCI Domain is the thing. It supports both inbound authentication and SSO using a different set of technologies, like, for example, federated with SAML, multi-factor authentication, adaptive security, and so on, which is very, very good features to have to protect your environment. We do synchronization with both Azure AD, on-prem AD. By the way, Azure AD and on-prem AD, they do have a common name, sharing a common piece of the name, but apart from that, they're not sharing anything, so the technology is completely different. Quite often mixed and misunderstood in the number of requests we get. We do have the provisioning bridge that is making it possible to provision and synchronize with third-party trusted sources. And of course, we have proper user and access management as a part of it. On the other hand, we could also do outbound SSO. So Identity Domain can also act as an identity provider to other sources, both becoming a service provider and identity provider, becoming the broker in the middle. And we could do, for example, log on to Linux, we could do log on to databases, and we could do, most important, log on to Oracle OCI and the Fusion applications deployed in OCI. So these are the aspects that we're going to slowly cover. We also have a good set of development tools and SDKs available if you'd like to build your own applications that integrate nicely with IDCS. Sorry, it's not IDCS, it's Identity Domains. So number of the standards REST APIs that you really need and would like to see in a development platform. So the most common asked questions we have: how do we federate from Azure AD to Fusion applications or to other applications deployed on OCI? That is, partially most of the world is moving to Azure AD as the primary identity provider, and integrating with that is important. So I'm going to show a little bit how that work at a later stage. But this is the picture, both provisioning from Azure AD and federation with Azure AD as the identity provider. So let's start with a simple case. You do have the identity domain in the middle that act as the central hub for doing all kind of authentication and authorization of whatever service you have deployed on OCI. That goes from Fusion applications, that goes from the home-built cloud-native applications, into your databases, autonomous, and so on. And we like to have a central hub for managing your OCI environment and any services that is deployed on OCI, and get a central OCI audit and logging for anything that is done. And of course, the simple use case is that, okay, we do have OCI and we federate that with the most common external IDPs in the market, which is Azure, Okta, and Ping. And like, for example, in my home country, which is Norway, we do have a number of public services that is also supporting both OpenID Connect or SAML that public sector customers would like to integrate with as well. But you have the central repository and the central storage for the user to log on. And when the user is then redirecting his browser to the services, he will then be redirected back to the OCI IAM domain, which is then will see that, hey, I would like to do a federated logon, and then redirect to the real identity provider and act as an identity broker in the middle. One of the starting use cases, and we've seen a very huge interest in that, is that we do have a number of customers that do have on-prem enterprise applications like Oracle EBS, JD, or Siebel. These applications quite often is using Oracle Access Manager and the classic on-prem enterprise IAM solutions. And with OCI IAM domain, what we really can do, we can remove the need for having all those other means integrated and integrate EBS, for example, directly with the OCI IAM domain, taking away the need for example, using Oracle Access Manager. That means that your on-prem enterprise applications could then be linked, for example, to Azure AD, which is pretty hard to do without the OCI IAM domain as the broker in between. Another interesting use case is that if you're running, for example, Oracle database, the Oracle database has two sets of actually logging on. One is to using the REST to get, for example, to the database actions to do the management work around the database. And the other thing is that the SQL directly from applications is also need to authenticate in order to execute any SQL statement. And from an app server in between, it's going to be more interesting actually to use a JVT or JV token instead of using a username and password to get to data and database. And then you can again have a centralized user management of your database user, Oracle database users as well. You don't need to create users in each and every database. So if you have 100 databases with 100 DBAs, consolidate that into OCI IAM domain instead of having 100 users hanging around. Another interesting option is to use what we call the best in service. Quite often your database and your Linux VMs and your Kubernetes environments and Kubernetes worker nodes is hosted behind the scenes. You don't want to expose them on public internet or on your net from your on-prem environment. And most people is then routing the request to a best in host. What we strongly encourage is not to use the best in host, but using a best in service, which is a service fully integrated with OCI IAM domains. Meaning again, yes, you authenticate with the OCI IAM domain and it's federated to Azure AD. That then creates a session for you to reach to your database or Linux VM. Meaning you don't need to maintain your username password on Linux any longer or in the databases any longer. You maintain your username password actually in Azure AD to get to the best in service. And you're getting the full audit and logging on everything that's goes on. Another common use case is this one. A number of customers have Fusion Cloud applications like Oracle HCM, like Oracle ERP or EPM. And they would like to integrate with Azure AD, Okta, or Ping, or whatever IDP they have. And you could either integrate it directly, but the recommendation is to go through the IAM domain, simply because if you then should at any stage later add any other service, you will still have the same central hub. So if you deploy some other services in OCI that don't support direct integration with an external IDP, then it will always go through OCI IAM domain as well. And for HCM and ERP use case, there are no extra additional cost of doing it that way, so there's no good reason for not doing it in this way. And the same argument when you have your own cloud-native applications deployed in OCI. We see more and more customers doing that. And we see the wider and wider community is actually start using OCI and Oracle Kubernetes in order to make sure that they have the enterprise business application hosted in the cloud. Of course, they also need an identity provider for the application and the cloud native applications as well. And for example, if you have a single page application that will grab some kind of JVT in order to authenticate the user and present that, you could go through OCI and doing IAM domain, doing that. And at the later stage, add whatever external IDP that is fit for purpose. And it builds the complete picture. Here are the different integrations you can do with, and here you see the main reason for having a central hub in between that act as IDP for all the different services that again can be a broker acting as a service provider for different external IDPs as well. So you consolidate everything, you have a consolidated user management for all the resources, and you have a consolidated audit and logging. and you have a consolidated set of policies and authentication and authorization policies and rules, and multi-factor authentication method for everything. So the simple synchronization use pattern then is that we could use the SCIM REST APIs. We could having Oracle OCI basically calling external resources via SCIM APIs, or we could have inbound call from external resources to OCI with SCIM API. That's a very simple use case. The more interesting one is this. We do have, for example, a trusted source like Azure AD, where we add a user to a group in Azure AD, and via the SCIM REST API, user is then created in our IAM domain. When the user is then created in the IAM domain, the question is, how do I create a user in Oracle Fusion App? Oracle Fusion App has a little interesting thing. Oracle Fusion App has basically two types of user stores. One is the HR database, where you have actually all the required user attributes, like, for example, which legal entity do a user belong to? What is going to be his default roles within the ERP application? And of course, the role model within the ERP application is quite complex and very specific for that ERP application. So that is managed through what we call the HR database within Fusion application. Then in addition, we have a tiny little user store that is basically used for driving single sign-on. The challenge is that the user store is supported by SCIM, versus the HR database is not supported by SCIM for natural reasons. I'm going to show you why. So one way you could do this is that when the user is created in the user directory in the IAM domain, that triggers an event. And with event services in OCI, you could then declare that when these events are triggered, we call a function. And a function is a serverless piece of code that is started when the event is triggered and dies when the event is over. The function is then pulling a number of, for example, parameters, for example, which compartment do I belong to, and where is my secure store. The function then is, for example, pulling a number of secrets from our vault, like, for example, what is the username password for doing the basic auth to the HR database. And those are data is collected, is logged, and the function is then calling the REST API that is not SCIM based to, for example, create a user in the database or create a user in the HR solution, the Oracle Fusion HR solution. So this is a pretty nice and easy way to build an integration end-to-end from, for example, Azure AD, add a group to a group in Azure that makes sure that user is then provisioned to OCI domain. The domain is then trigger event that calls a function that's called REST API to create a user in the HR system. And the other way around, the user is removed, the flow goes the other way around, and finally the user is removed. And so that is I think is the easiest way to integrate from end-to-end from Azure or Okta or Ping or whatever external IDP you have, or if you just manage to use it directly in the OCI domain, make sure that you create a user in the proper way inside Fusion applications. It's not sufficient just to create a user via the SCIM REST API in the application user store of Fusion. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that and natural reasons for that. The other interesting thing that we released in 19C is that we could now authenticate users with database token in the database. And the database token is coming from the IAM solution, meaning that if the user is removed from the IAM solution, he won't be able to create in the token any longer, he won't be able to log into the database any longer. So for developers and for admin staff, and also for applications that need to authenticate to a database, it's an excellent way to have proper centralized governance of all your database, Oracle database accounts, which is normally a nightmare if you have a number of databases. So let's move then a little bit into to do some quick demos for you. So the first demo I'm going to do is to show you a little bit about how the last piece I showed you, how that worked. So now I'm going to do a database token just to start with. SSH. So first, these are the statements that need to be done in the database. Here I'm creating the user. I'm creating a central user called OCI user. So anyone who is logged on to the database will be logged on as OCI user in the database, but is mapped back to a repository user in my OCI IAM domain. Then there's a few things, config settings you need to do on the database side, explaining who is the provider, blah, blah, blah. That is not the important piece. Then I'm generating a token. First one, I'll just copy an old token just to show how that works. Try to log on. SQLnet configuration, this is how it looks. You need to configure SSL in order to make it run. TNS names, and here you see on TNS names, it points directly to where is the token stored. So if you log on without any user or without any password, it's going to look for the token in that file. Then I'll try to log on, and it fails because it has expired. Then I run the OCI command in order to generate the token. So now I'm using my API key to Oracle OCI with my own username, my own private API key that is unique to me. So it identifies me specifically and generates a token. When that token is generated, it takes some time to do it. It updates, and then I'll log in on again with just a slash, no username, password. I'm connected, but I'm logged on as the OCI user. I'm not logged on as Pelle, which was my username. But then, that we see both in the audit trail of the database, and we see it also in the database. If you're then looking up with the user environment authenticate identity, you will see my OCI identity coming in. So each different users that logs on with their API key and their token will have a different authenticated identity, which is the true identity of the user. But Pelle Parafin do not exist at all in the database as an individual user. And if Pelle is leaving my organization, I don't need to remove him from the database, I just remove him from OCI. And that's first simple demo. The next demo I'm going to show you a little bit of is how you actually is using the different REST APIs. Quick demo of that. So first thing I need to do is to generate a token. So here I'm generating a token via the REST API. You see, basically it's using the OS v1 and I'm getting a token out of it. That took a few seconds to do. So this is the REST API I'm calling. We are curl with my client ID, client secret, and I'm generating a new token. That token and then import into Postman. I have it here. I already done it, so hopefully this has not expired yet. And I could go in and create a user, Bruce Wayne. Let's try to create him. And that's worked pretty well. So look at my users. And here I see Bruce Wayne popped up, so I can just remove him. And just make sure that I'm not faking you, recreate him. And if we do that once more, it fails because it already exists. And now Bruce Wayne is back into business in my repository. And so that's basically using the Skim REST API in order to do that. This is a post with a predefined payload to the Skim REST API. The way you create a user then in Oracle Fusion is slightly different, because in Oracle Fusion you need to have more attributes to the users. For example, which are the users' legal entity, what kind of action code do you have, what is the business unit. So a whole bunch of additional data that you have in order to create the user in Fusion apps. And that's why it's not fit for purpose doing it with Skim. Skim is not rich enough to enrich the record. You really need to make sure that this user is a legitimate user or my ERP system belonging to the correct organization, to the correct business unit. So that's why we have a separate REST API for doing that. So then I could run this. And in this case, we are using basic auth. We are not using token. So the pure REST APIs for Oracle HCM is using basic auth. The user already exists, so it will fail, but just to show you that at least my statement executes correctly. And then you could see, for example, what is the curl code that is used for this. And copy paste the curl code if you like to run it. And then I could look up and see if the user then actually is created after creation. And here you see Björn Olsen, which is me, is coming from here, is then created within Fusion ERP. So in this schema we have here, this function can then be enriched with all the attributes you need in addition to what you get from Azure. Be enriched and calling that REST API to create a user both in the HR database and use the Scheme REST API to create the user here. So that is that's fairly simple flow. Another thing which touched up on was the best-in service. So the best-in service is something you can use interactively. And I think, well, I actually time has expired. So while the best-in service is creating interactive, I could show you the best-in configuration. That's a good reason for using a more smart way to log on. This, forget about it. Skip that. So now it's creating. I'm creating a session that I could use for SSH. So it's creating the session in my repository here. So I'm creating the session here. It's logged here and here. And when that session creation is done, it's ready, I could SSH from the outside world. So the compute node I'm sitting in here is outside world to a service that is inside. So minor issue here, to a service that is on my internal network. So sorry about that. This should have worked. It worked this morning. But I'm creating a SSH session that I could actually log into. I actually logged in. I'll see here. I'm logged in. Because my script is doing SSH automatically, so I'm logging into this this internal service that is not exposed to the internet from the external internet because I go through the best-in service. Which also means that if I remove myself from the user from here, I won't have access to the best-in service any longer. So that is the simple services. Now let's look into how we could do it from a applications point of view. So here do we have a Fusion application environment that I'd like to log on to. And it's configured with single sign-on. So I'm going to log on to company single sign-on. Then I redirect it to my OCI IAM domain. On purpose, I've stopped here just to show that I'm stopping here with this as a broker. I could remove this, I was automatically redirected to Azure AD. But just to show that we stop here, then I'm going to move to Azure AD. And here I have my user called Duran with a horrible name. Click on that and enter the password. Authenticated against then Microsoft. No. And then I redirected back, and if you saw 2 steps, I was touching into my OCI IAM domain before I was redirected back to Fusion apps. So here I'm logged on into Fusion applications as Duran, which happens to be based out of France. So here it's French. So the problem is to understand what's written here. Here I'm logged on to the same environment, but this time as the administrator. I don't care about benefits. I would like to go to my tools. And here you can go to tools, the security console, and single sign-on. And here's my identity provider. This is how I configure single sign-on in Fusion Apps. It's very simple. You basically look the metadata and fill in some URLs, and that's basically it. So it's not that much you need to fill in. And you see that we'll see that in the diagnostic and in the metadata. If you explore that, you will see that I'm going to Oracle Identity Cloud Service. So this one is the entry point that is then hitting by the single sign-on. So here is where I configure the single sign-on, like the identity provider. So here I set up my Azure AD configuration. And again, since it's SAML, it's fairly simple. You have an issue ID and you upload and you do the metadata exchange. And that's basically it on the Oracle side. On the Azure Active Directory side, it's fairly simple. You go in and create what we call the enterprise application. You can do a new. And it's pre-built a number of applications like called Oracle. And one of the interesting one is called Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Console. Kind of misleading name, but it points you directly to integrate with OCI IAM domain, which is already done. So you don't need to. So you could go into this one, which is on my always free. And here is how you configure the single sign-on. So it's a basic configuration. Again, these are inherited from the import of data or the metadata from Oracle, from this one. And the interesting thing, just to point that out, you see that the naming conventions here and Durand, her full user principal name is this, versus in the application, username is slightly different. Where did she? There she go. Username here is just and Durand, without the full string here. So what we then done within the applications is, and what you can do within the applications, which is fairly simple, is that you could configure the single sign-on and the scopes. So the attribute and claims. So in the attribute and claims section, you could, for example, create your own filters. Well, create your own transformation saying that I will map a member only to the user principal name, the email mail prefix part, everything that is in front of the Alpha Pro. So that is what is passed on to Oracle. So in the Oracle side, the user is just named and Durand without the @microsoft.com. So that filtering is done in the claim section. So this is fairly simple to work with, and I've put together a number of slides and how-to guides that are explaining each and every step on how to do this. I'm just giving you the pretty much high-level overview of how to do it. So then finally, let's look a little bit into the last piece we have here, this one. Just show you quickly the things that need to be done in order to do that. You do have, okay, I've been timed out. It's a good thing. Guess you get tired of seeing my username. Yes, and since I'm a good soldier, do what I tell you to do. I'm doing the multi-factor authentication. Let's see. And I'm logged in. And I can start with looking into identity and security, where I do have, for example, my vault, which is of interest. I do have the observability and managing, where I do have the event service. and I do have developer service where I do have the functions. So let's start looking into the vault. So here is where I have configured the username password to get to the Fusion basic auth. So that is configured here. Let's see, secrets. So here are my client secret and my client ID. And so those are used for the basic auth to get to in this case to get to the HR data. What I also done, I put this in a specific security compartment where I do have the policies that is only the function that is able to retrieve and read those secrets, nobody else. And it's only a very specific predefined administrator group, that is the vault administrators, who's the only one who is allowed to do any changes here. Nobody else is allowed to do that. So that is the vault. The other thing we need is to have the rules of how do we actually engage with this. So here on the IAM event rule. This is a rule that kicks in each time one of these events is happening. A group is added, removed, a user is created, a user is deleted. So if any of these things happen in my default domain, then these will kick in. And the action is I'm calling this function. This function IAM sync, that is the function based on IAM event. This is the function. So the function is it's a Python function. And that is then reading the secret type. It's reading a file name for doing some logging. And it's reading the OCID of the password and the username in my vault. So it means that the function administrated by itself do not have access at all, do not have access to the content of the vault because it's not executing as the function. So it's only when the function is executing is able to retrieve the secrets via those password OCID and username OCID. So that is the complete flow here. So that's kind of showing you some different aspects of this. So this one is a fairly interesting one because here we are putting together the different aspects of and different benefits of the cloud and the OCI IAM domain. It's very easy then to build, for example, integration with a database. We do have REST support for database. You don't need to have JDBC included in the function. You could just call your database directly via REST and do create, update, delete of users in a normal Oracle database directly in exactly the same way. And in this way, built a fairly easy and simple way to integrate from the start with Azure or Ping or Okta or whatever. So when the user is then provisioned via Skim from here to here, then you do the rest of the user maintenance inside the cloud. You don't need to expose this to the outside world, to your on-prem IAM solution. So what I'm going to do then finally is then also point out that we are going to extend this. So the next step, we just now talked about the simple user administration, the simple user creation, group management, and federation and provisioning. We're extending this to another service called Oracle Access Governance. And that's really applying intelligence to which users do I have, why do I have them. Somebody needs to reattest that these users still should have these accesses. What kind of risks do I have? So we really have a tool for having a data warehouse, monitoring and analyzing what are all the different user entitlements I have to get a much stronger and better governance around than we have today. So that goes beyond the standard kind of directory type of user management and moves into a full-blown AI-driven, data warehouse-driven governance management solution for all the entitlements across both enterprise applications and cloud-based applications. So that's the next step. That is not going to be a topic for this session today, but it's going to be a topic for a later session because a really nice and nifty tool in order to make sure that you do have proper governance after action, making people accountable, making people and forcing them actually to do user reattestation and cleanup, so they don't have a privilege creep over time. So that is kind of concluding what I plan to say today. So I added a section called useful resources. So I've created my own really GitHub called BIOS62, where I have a folder called IDCS samples. Here you'll find how you could configure multi-factor authentication, how you could do the federation with Azure AD, step-by-step, screenshot step-by-step, how we could set up the Fusion SSO, integration with identity domains, how we generate tokens from the solution, and so on. So I put step-by-step guides as PDFs that is showing the different scenarios that I was showing in the scenario section. You will typically find a PDF here that is explaining and screenshot step-by-step how to do it. So that's one place to look. The other thing that we have that is very interesting is that we do have the Oracle Architecture Center that has a number of solutions, 500 plus solutions, including integration patterns for IAM. The Trust Center is more for if you like to look into the compliance section. But you'll also find a number of interesting things in our Oracle Live Labs. It's actually, we create an environment where you could do dry run and play with it on yourself without needing to set it up in your own environment. So look into the Live Labs as well. And then I have a number of links that is pointing out the different, more details on the different topics what we discussed today that you can look into. So that's kind of concludes what I plan to go through.
Inge, just before you go, you mentioned at the very start, we always kind of ask, and you said that if there's a question that comes up 90% of the time, the one, I know obviously there's a ton of questions, and thanks Paul and Olaf for doing all the work. One question you said that comes up a lot is, and I think you've actually answered, you raised it already, but I'll just raise it just to be clear. Integration with Azure, is there an additional cost?
No, there's not. With OCI IAM domain, you can, in the version that is a part of a subscription, you can integrate with Azure AD and 2 others. So we said I could add up to 3 external IDPs within your base subscription. And also the scheme REST APIs for doing provisioning is also open and defined in your base subscription as well. Actually, most of the things we talked about today is included in the base subscription. Or if you're going to go into more details on-prem enterprise Oracle Fusion applications, then you might need to upgrade to what we call the apps premium, which is a fairly low cost anyway.
And there was one question on that, Inge, that's just we answered, but it's worth pointing out, is somebody asked about the AD bridge, and you're exactly right. On the new SKUs, you can use it for free, but on IDCS, you can't.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm talking about the new version called OCI IAM domains. We still have the legacy version called IDCS. The licensing rules between IDCS and OCI IAM domain is slightly changed. So the OCI IAM domain is much more, what I said, consumer friendly. When we added more things that was in the premium price before, is now in the base price or base subscription in the OCI IAM domain. So we are a little bit between the two IDCS and ICS domain. So doing what I did, what I showed, we're doing the flow from having the events and the events trigger the functions. That is a new feature in the OCI IAM domain. Everyone can get OCI IAM domains. The simple way to getting it is to create a child tenant in your tenant, and then the new child tenant will always be created with OCI IAM domains and not with IDCS.
And thank you everyone for joining our call and for staying with us until the end of this session. And of course, we hope you enjoyed the call, and we hope to see you again soon. With that, I would like to end the call. Thank you all and have a great day. Bye-bye.